So we're first of all going to create a straightforward chart in Excel 2010, and I'm going to use this first example as a way of demonstrating the basic sequence of steps with all the types of graph or chart that we're going to create. Now there will be some variation from this sequence, and there are actually sometimes a couple of steps to add on the end, but basically it's a 4-step process. The first step is to select the data that we're going to use. The second step is to choose the graph or chart. Step 3 is to choose a layout and design for the graph or chart, and the fourth step is to customize that accordingly. Now, as I said just now, we may need to do 1 or 2 additional points, but basically we're always going to follow this 4-step process. So now let's work through those 4 basic steps with a very straightforward example of a simple chart. Now I have a workbook here relating to the cost of building a house. The worksheet on it is called Earned Value, and I'm going to select some of the financial information and create a chart from it. I select the data in this case in the way that you'll usually select it, that is by dragging with the mouse and selecting the area that I want to use. Now within this area I have the financial information, the numbers here, and also what are basically the variable values relating to the 2 axes on the chart that I'm going to draw. I'll explain that more a little bit later on. With my data selected, I now want to actually insert the chart. So go to the Insert tab, click on Insert, and there is a Charts group on the ribbon. There will normally be 7 icons in there, and you may see these 7 icons in a row or squashed up together like mine because of the resolution on the screen that I'm using. Just choose the first one for the moment, which is the column chart, and then choose 3D column. We'll go for the first option, click on that, and there we are. We straight away, and in a very simple and straightforward way, have a chart representing this data. Now, one very important thing to appreciate early on is that Excel 2010 will make a good stab at guessing what each of the values in your selected data represents, and it has a set of rules that it follows by default to interpret your data, and that's exactly what it's done in this case. Now, going back to the question I raised earlier on of what all these things mean, let me just talk about them now a little bit. The categorization here in terms of cost, these are dollar values or pound values, it doesn't matter which here, the numbers. And without understanding at all what these values actually mean, Excel 2010 has used those on the horizontal axis of our chart. Now in fact, ACWP for example stands for actual cost of work performed. But Excel doesn't really need to know what it means in order to do a chart on this basis. Similarly, it's used the other labels here, project, pre-work and prepare, and use those as basically the dividers, the components in which the costs are split to create our blocks. Blue for project, red for pre-work, green for prepare. Again, it doesn't really need to have any idea of what these terms mean. All it's done is to use those to create the individual blocks, and the numbers in the body of the selected data are plotted against this vertical scale. We've put 0 to 6,000. Excel 2010 has no idea what these numbers are. They could be degrees Fahrenheit, they could be dollars, they could be the number of people that are living in a certain town, they could be anything. It just knows that they're numbers, and it's up to us to put the interpretation on what each of these things represents. Now the third step in this process is to actually change the layout or the design of the chart that we've created. And in this case, once you've created a chart and the chart itself is selected, a new set of tabs appears on the ribbon under the overall heading Chart Tools, and we have Design, Layout and Format tabs within that. Let's start with the Design tab here. Now on the Design tab we have a number of options, and we're going to look at all of those as part of this course, but let's start with the Chart Layouts group. And if I click on the control at the bottom here, the More control, I'm given another number of options for the chart layout. Now this basically determines where things like the legend appear. If I click on the option here, the first option, I get a title with the legend on the right. But if I wanted the legend, say, at the bottom, I could click on this option. This is Layout 3. And clearly it's straightforward to experiment with the different options. We'll come back to talk about the chart title in a little while. So, as the name implies, chart layout deals merely with the layout of the items within the chart, so position of the title, the legend and some basic layout items, and we're going to look at chart layouts in more detail later on. The other major option on this tab is the Chart Styles group, and as you may know, with Office 2010 there is an integrated set of themes and styles that crosses the various components of Office 2010, including Excel 2010 but also Word 2010 and Access 2010 and so on. And we can choose from the available standard themes and styles. Now one very quick way, a simple way of doing this is just to choose one of the icons on the ribbon here. So the one I've got selected is the one that's in force. If I click on the next one along, we can see how the color scheme changes. And of course, apart from color scheme changes, we can have built-in font and other stylistic changes as well. And as we'll see later on, if we go to the drop down here, the More gives us a whole range of alternative styles that we can use, including some more dramatically different ones. Now, as you can see from this, there are some tools provided in Excel 2010 that make graphing and charting very straightforward, and if you need to quickly make a graph or chart and match it to a particular style, you can produce pretty good graphs and charts very quickly with Excel 2010. If you're new to graphing and charting, one of the mistakes you may make early on is to actually get the variables that you're graphing or charting the wrong way round. Here I saw the breakdown project, pre-work, prepare, and the three different ways of analysing costs. If I'd wanted those the other way around, I could obviously go back here and switch my data table round, but there's a very straightforward button on the Design tab, Switch Row and Column, which is sort of provided really for situations where people do get things the wrong way around. It's a very straightforward, just click it once, and as you can see, it's interchanged the positions of the two main variables that are used in this chart. So now we come to the fourth step in the basic creation of a straightforward chart, and this is the one where we customize the chart. Now the Design tab basically gives us the simple, straightforward, fairly high level ways of changing a chart or graph. The Layout tab, on the other hand, lets us go down into much more detail. So for instance, we could select something like the chart title, and we could say there's none, or we could say it's a centered overlaid title, which is pretty much what it is now, more or less. Or we can go into more title options, and with more title options we have a full set of formatting options for our graph title, and we're going to look at those later on. Other things we can change are axis titles, legend, data labels and so on, and we can also insert other objects such as text box, shapes, pictures. Again, more on those later on. But for really detailed customization and formatting of a chart, we have the Format tab, where we can go into individual fonts, we can use word art styles, shape styles and so on, and actually really go to town on formatting a chart exactly the way that we want it to appear. Some of these actually also allow for live preview. So as I hover over the shape styles here, you can see that the chart title, the style of it, the border on it is changing, and if I go into word art styles, I can get different word art styles on the title as well. So we have live preview options as well. So there we have it. You should now have some idea of the sequence of steps we're going to follow when we're creating graphs and charts in Excel 2010. And from the next section, we're going to look at a more complete example in a lot more detail and look at some more of the features of these various Excel 2010 charting tools. I'll see you then.